Tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, so be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, welcome to Tea Time. You know what that means. It is storytelling time and words. That's what we do on this platform. We don't serve a beverage. We serve words and storytelling. And today I have the incredible Frederick Schofield in the house, and we're going to be talking murder, mafia, crimes, all of that good stuff. So get ready because it's going to be a really deep, strong tea today. Before we get started, we're going to get you over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel. Ring that little doorbell so you're notified when these tea times are live, and you can join the live streams with your questions, comments, and support and all that good stuff. If you'd like to stay anonymous, you can also send Miss Liz a private DM message on my Facebook page, and I'll get those questions out to Frederick if they're related to the discussion, of course. So I want to thank everybody for joining Miss Liz. As you know, this is a countdown. Frederick is my number 3. We have 3 tea times left before we wrap up Miss Liz's podcast of 5 long years and amazing seasons. So, and then we'll get you over on the December 19th to the reunion show. If you're able to join us, that'll be live stream. That is a free event, and donations are always welcome to help Miss Liz with her future projects and all that good stuff. So, but before all of that good stuff, we're going to serve some strong tea today, and the tea is tantalizing every audience. That's the tea we're serving tonight on this afternoon with Tea Time, or this evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. So let's get started with disclaimer and bio, and let me get Frederick in here, and let's spill some tea on an American Academy Award-winning actress Grace Kelly, and more to come. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forth dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that the show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection, and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panel discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later date at a later show in time. And again, there's only 3 tea times left. So if you want to see any of the old tea times, go to Miss Liz's YouTube channel, ring that little doorbell, and it always helps Miss Liz out as well, and my guests. I'm big on connecting and collaborating. So if you want to check that out, do that. So now a little bit on who I have in the house and who's in the back room. Well, I have Frederick Schofield in the back room, and he delivers stories that are deeply personal and inspired by his unique life experience. A Run to Hell draws from his familiar ties to Grace Kelly and his professional connections with the Philadelphia Mafia family. His years as a trial lawyer in Atlantic City inspires the Boardwalkers, where he represents many marginalized voices, making him one of the most notable legal advocates in the gambling mecca. Mecca, I'll get him to say it. Raised in Quada Fate, Schofield embodies the principle of pacifism, yet earns decorations for valor as U.S. Marine. He diverse career, including being an on-air radio host, an executive for the Boy Scouts of America, a college professor, and a trial lawyer. Reviewers raves about his engaging writing styles and the depth of his characters. The press of Atlantic City says Schofield is fun, he's entertaining, and a storyteller. So let me get that storyteller in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Frederick.
That was pretty amazing. That was quite good, actually. That's who I am, I guess. I'm a lawyer who had practiced for about 40 years in the Philadelphia area and in the Atlantic City area, which is about 90 miles, well, about 60 miles away, actually, from Philadelphia. And I have stories that come from both towns. And we usually like to start with the story about Grace Kelly, because there's a certain reference point for almost everybody with Grace Kelly. Grace was an Academy Award-winning actress who married the Prince of Monaco to become a princess in real life. And actually, the story that we have with Grace comes from my father, who grew up as a little boy next door to Grace. They were the same age. And the Kelly family and the Schofield family became well connected. We knew, or my father knew, Grace before she became a big name actress, when she was a little girl who used to chase boys twice her size out of her backyard because she had a stick and she could chase them. And the little girl who became a superstar of her day as an actress with what they call star power, which really means a certain sense of sexuality with a girl next to her face, and that was Grace. Grace had quite a career in Hollywood, also on the stage. And in fact, she was headstrong enough that she was able to work out a Hollywood contract that allows her to take time off to do Broadway stage theater. And she did that for a number of years. But as I said, Dad knew Grace. They were grow-up buddies. And when she was murdered, and we'll come to that, a lot of things happened that kicked off in our family, being next door to Grace, or from my father's days. And here's what some of them are, and I find them kind of interesting. Grace was a girl who won her Academy Award. She could have done anything she wanted in life. But after she filmed a movie, a great film with Cary Grant called To Catch a Thief, which was filmed in Monaco with Otto Preminger as the director. After she did that, she received a guy into her life who proposed marriage. And the guy just happened to be the Prince of Monaco. It was a wedding announced in Philadelphia by Grace's father. Grace's father grew up as a bricklayer who became humongously wealthy, running the largest construction company in the city. An amazing guy who had an amazing son as well. We'll get to Kel Jr. in a little bit. But the family upbringing, the camaraderie between Grace and my dad as children, and Grace's younger brother, who became a very good friend of my uncle. They attended the same boys' school that I attended in Philadelphia, which is around the corner from Grace's East Falls section of Philadelphia. They all became good friends and dear friends. They stayed in contact. So the story came from them, but not just from them. Because in my practice of law, over 40 years in the Philadelphia area and the Atlantic City area, I came into contact with other people, including people that were associates or connected with the Philadelphia crime family. Now, let me tell you about the Philadelphia Mafia family. The Philadelphia Mafia family was violent even by mafia standards, and it was known for that. It was known for replacing every head of the family by killing the existing head of the family. And they had an unpleasant way of dealing with almost everybody, but they were known as the boys downtown. If you were one of them and they referred to somebody else as one of their boys from downtown, you knew you were dealing with somebody from the family. I came into contact with them, representing them in my law practice. It was not unusual for people in my family to be involved with that kind of stuff. My great-grandfather, Anderson B. Schofield, was in his day, at the apex of his career, he was also the director of the police department and the director of the fire department at the same time that he ran a criminal law practice, which meant if you had a criminal problem, you went to my great-grandpop. He straightened out everything. He was the best. And in fact, when we get to Atlantic City, remind me to tell you about the lawyer I would have represent me if I had ever gotten into trouble.
It was Grandpa?
Grandpop was pretty good. Great-grandpop was pretty terrific. And I come from a long line of lawyers and alcoholics. I was a lawyer. There came a point in time where Grace ran into some problems as the Princess of Monaco, which we touch on when we get to a story called A Run to Hell.
I like the title. I really like the title, Frederick, because when you sent me the book, I was just like, A Run from Hell.
I will sign it and send it. It is a good story. I'll send you 2 books because I want you to see the Boardwalkers also. But A Run to Hell tells in the first part of its story the tale of Grace Kelly and how she was murdered. Grace Kelly, if you might remember, going back to 1985, as she was at that point in time in her life, the Princess of Monaco, had an accident that snuffed her life. How that accident happened is what is told in A Run to Hell. How do we know about it? Well, we know about it because my father remained close with his neighbors, his former neighbors. Jack Kelly Jr., who was Grace's brother, happened to be an Olympic medal winner in sculling, rowing down the river. And he was also the president of the U.S. Olympic Committee at the time that he was murdered as well. Jack investigated Grace's death, along with his former brother-in-law, Eugene, who came into the picture because he happened to be able to do things like investigate. But Jack and Eugene both died by murder on Philadelphia streets. And if you pick up the book, A Run to Hell, you'll see the newspaper articles that document the death. They both died on Philadelphia streets, 6 hours and 6 blocks apart.
Isn't that odd? Do you find that odd, or do you find there's a connection to
At the
everything?
time,
all the connecting the dots, right?
Yeah, at the time, the Philadelphia Press said it's a remarkable coincidence. The 2 perfectly healthy middle-aged men died apparently of heart conditions or something close to it. The cause of death for Jack was never announced and was declared as being unknown in the newspapers. And we have the newspaper printings of the newspaper articles in the book, A Run to Hell by Frederick Schofield. And the story, the first part of that story takes off from there. Now there's a second part of that story, which deals with a totally different subject, but the same main characters. You follow in A Run to Hell a trial lawyer who comes along much like me, and an immigrant from Panama who becomes an FBI special agent. And they work through a second problem in part 2 of the book. And that second part of the problem is Manuel Noriega, who was both the president of Panama, a general of Panama, and a malicious dictator who solved political issues by arrest, rape, murder, and things that come nastier than that. I know a lot about that story because my mentor in the criminal law was a fellow by the name of Raymond J. Takeoff. And Raymond represented Manuel Noriega when he was arrested in Panama by the United States Armed Forces. We sent the largest posse the world has ever seen to the little country of Panama to arrest one guy.
Wow.
That was in the late 80s. And when that happened, certain things kicked off with Ray. And Ray He's almost the character. There are two characters that we follow in A Run to Hell. As I mentioned, a criminal lawyer and a young lady who immigrated from Panama. We follow them because they have a backdrop that ties into both stories. The backdrop is kind of it's special. It's a special thing. And most of my books, or the books that we're going to talk about today, what they have in common is that historically they are accurate. Everything that happens in A Run to Hell happened in real life. And everything that we talk about in both books are things that I've experienced in the criminal law. Maybe we move off of that story for a little bit, but I think it's a story well worth reading. It was good writing. It was a lot of fun writing it.
Well, Frederick, being
let's take a quick peek,
and
and we can come back to all of this. Let's take a quick peek.
oh,
I'm sorry?
we get this? Being connected to this and having neighbors and having the family share these stories with you, like growing up and knowing Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly was one of my favorite princesses of all times. I really looked up to her because she was that actress that became a princess, right? It's like that Cinderella story. But she didn't have that Hollywood ending, So how long did it take?
No, she didn't.
How long did it take, Frederick, for them to know that it wasn't an accident and that it was actual murder?
The family knew immediately. Grace got tied up in some things, and it was also connected to Philadelphia. And it comes through two mafia families, the family in Nice in France and the family in Philadelphia, which work together. Why might they work together? An interesting thing, why might they work against Grace? You have to remember that the country, Monaco, is no bigger than Central Park in New York.
Really?
The country has no army, and its police force is on loan from France. So there is no real police force there. There's not a whole lot protecting the monarchy. The monarchy exists because a bunch of pirates took over the country about 300 years ago. And France granted the pirates this principality, not a monarchy who would have a king or a queen, but they have a prince and a princess. And so long as the people on the throne have a male to hand the country to, they remain in power. And it's remains that way today. In fact, I know one of Grace's son bought a house next door to Grace's house in Philadelphia to set up as a location for one of his charitable organizations, because the little country of France, as small as it is, as small as Central Park, or rather, is. As small as it is a great place to live if you can afford to move in, because there are no taxes.
Oh.
They have something there that pays the country's budget, and it's called the casino in Monaco. It is a very valuable asset. It makes a ton of money, and it brings in people. One of the reasons that Grace married the prince was that the casino was having a problem with its draw. It was kind of dwindling. And the Prince of Monaco, Rainier, needed a way to light it up and bring in the stars and bring in the glitter and bring in all the glitz that you'll see in the casinos. I'll talk to you more about that when we go to Atlantic City. So he married a princess who brought in a whole of Hollywood pals to enjoy the place. They were able to put some glitter back into it, which all casinos have. And she did so good a job at that the place became a very valuable asset. And that's all I'm going to say about it. What happened with Grace and how she died and who might be involved. I know exactly who was involved, the book tells you. But we got to sell books. So we
Yeah.
there.
You got to go out and grab a book, guys. You got to check it out. When you send me the books, Frederick, I was like, oh, this sounds like something I want to read. you know, but I really like the title, a run to hell. Because I
We have
was
two
like,
characters that actually run through it. It's a good thing to run to hell. It's a tougher thing to run away.
yeah,
That's what happens to these two characters. And both of them have their own motivations. Jamie, the immigrant who becomes an FBI agent, has a background with General Noriega's nemesis in real life, Hugo Spadafora, who was a physician and revolutionary. But Hugo became the nemesis of Noriega. And there are things that happen in there, and although Noriega may have seemed to take the upper hand at one point of Hugo, even after he was placed in prison, Hugo Spadafora's ghost chased Noriega through his dreams. And Noriega was an interesting guy. He was started out as poor as you can be in life. His father deserted his mother. His mother raised him till he was about 5 and then kind of dumped him. He had no one supporting him, but he found out that he had a stepbrother that he didn't even know about. But the stepbrother had a political position that allowed Noriega to go to a military academy and complete his education. And while he was in a military academy, he became an agent of the CIA. Now, it's tough to figure out what a kid in a military academy could tell the CIA, but they groomed him. They sent him off to Fort Golic, which is an army base in Panama, for training. And he became one of our assets in Central America at a point in time when Cuba was becoming communist. We were seeing all kinds of uprisings that seemed to threaten American interests between Castro and what else was going on in Latin America at the time. But we had our friend. We had Noriega, a little boy who grew up poorer than any of us, who came to have more wealth than any of us. At the time of his death, he had a net worth that was just humongous. He owned 7 estates, France, his country, around the globe. But it was all through his drug dealings. He became a partner to Pablo Escobar, who headed the Medellin drug cartel. And they shipped mountains of cocaine through the Panama Canal, and it created a fortune for Noriega. So much of a fortune and so much of a problem that the United States decided that they had to take him out. And that's what we did. We took out the guy who was shipping cocaine into the United States. If only we could figure out a way to do that for people that are shipping drugs into the United States today. But that line of drug trafficking died at the time that Noriega was taken away from the control of the Panama Canal. That was an interesting thing, actually. We didn't want to give up the Panama Canal. The French dug the hole. They started. They got malaria. They couldn't finish it. So the Americans came in, and we built the Panama Canal, and we owned it under a treaty for 100 years. And Ronald Reagan was famous by saying, "We'll never give it up. We built it, we paid for it, and we're going to keep it." But we had a treaty, so we gave it back to him anyway. We gave it back fair and square, and we lost our canal because basically what happened was, when you look at it, we built the canal. Perhaps we had a claim to the canal, but they owned the ground underneath it. So we gave it back to the Panamanians, who are very proud of that even to today. And some of the characters in the story, when you get to part 2, you get past the Grace Kelly story, you get into the story of Manuel Noriega. They show their nationalistic pride and the way they felt about that transaction happening. They're good people down there. It's a place where there are a lot of American expatriates, particularly military people who may have served there before we gave up the canal and continued to live there afterwards. But interesting tale. And my my friend Ray Takeoff, who was involved in defending Manuel Noriega. It was an interesting guy. I grew up in an office, legally, I grew up in an office next door to his, and he taught me how to practice the criminal law. He taught me how to bill. That was the most important thing. He taught me that right off. I had no idea he had to do that, but he taught me how to bill. And he also taught me other things. I remember he sent me off for my first case as a young lawyer. I was practicing law maybe 4 to 6 months. He sent me off to try a case in front of a jury. And I really had no idea what to do. Ray gave me a file at 4:30 in the afternoon and said, I cannot appear in front of this judge again. He hates me. You try this case. And I took the file and I opened the file, and it had the charge sheet and it had a billing statement. And that was the file. And I won that case. I felt very good about that. It was in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. I had a juror, though, that landed up on the case. That was in my neighborhood as I grew up. And a woman named Mrs. Steiger asked as we selected the jury, are you little Freddie Schofield that I used to babysit for? And I said, yes, Mrs. Steiger, how are you? And she stayed on the jury. I think she helped. Did well. I have no idea why she wasn't stricken. And when the case was done, the judge called me forward and said, beginner's luck, Mr. Schofield. Because I told the jury, as Ray told me, the only advice he gave me was, every time you get a chance to say it, you say to the jury, I hope you will forgive me if I make any mistakes, because this is the first time I've ever done this. And I must have said it 30 times.
Well, it was a good line to use, right?
Oh, it was perfect. It was perfect. But Ray was a brilliant thinker, and he never had notes in his files. He kept it in his brain, and he was just kind of lucky that I was able to pull it off, not having much more than a charge sheet. But yeah. But let's run to. Can we run to Atlantic City?
We'll jump into Atlantic City in a few seconds. We have a couple questions that came in that I would like to get them out to you, Frederick. So what got you into the writing of these types of thriller stories?
I'm sorry?
What got you into the writing field of thriller stories?
Well, I've always liked to tell stories. That's what I've been good at. And the stories were out there. If you're a writer and you're looking for a story, the stories are out there. You just have to sniff them out. That's all.
Oh, you got to sniff, right?
And then what you do is, here's how I did this. And maybe this is all wrong, but this is how I did this. I would know where the story I was going to probably go, but you have to have characters, and the characters have to draw interest. So what you do is this. You determine who your characters might be, and then you spend time before you even write the story writing out their life histories, a life history for every character in the book. And that's what I did. I had notes all over my house, laying in neat piles with names on them. And when I came to a character, I would go to my notes and see what might they do in the situation. And I think that's a good way to get started with a book. I think that's a good way to write a book. And I think if you can, have some sense for the English language, which helps if you're writing in English. I think you can just pull it all together. It's easier than you think. It really is. And I have to tell you, I loved every character who was in my books. When they died, I felt sad. When they lived, I felt good.
The next question I have for you, Frederick, is what is the number one case that really impacted your life?
The number one what?
Law case that you've had in your lifetime.
I represented, I have two of them that come to mind. I represented a former colonel in the army of the Shah of Iran.
Okay.
He had escaped when the Shah was deposed and came to New Jersey, of all places, where he worked on an army base, and he was known as Dr. Malpractice. But he continued to work.
Oh,
And Dr. Katami, in an office, we called him the Ayatollah Dr. Ola. But the physician worked in New Jersey at Fort Dix. I believe he's not alive, so I can tell the story. He had a problem with his car. The car was in his driveway, and he pulled it off to go to the Fort Dix Army base on the street, and the car shifted by itself. There was an icy day, and he got out of the car and he took off some ice from his window and jumped back into the car. But before he could get all the way in, the car shifted itself from neutral into drive, and then drove him across his lawn and crashed into his house with him dragging behind the car with his foot stuck inside the where you would have the brake and the gas pedal. And he had some serious injuries. And that was the case, I guess it was in the 1980s. And the highest General Motors was willing to put on the case was $50,000, and we took it to trial. We got a verdict that was big enough that the thing was written up in lawyer reviews at the time. And we got the case despite the doctor, because after the case was over, and this was in the federal district court in Trenton, New Jersey, the judge said, "Counselors, would you mind if we survey the jury to find out how they came to their verdict?" Which was so happy for me. I didn't care what they asked the jury. So they were asked, and they said, the judge asked, "Did you like defense counsel?" They liked defense counsel. "Did you like plaintiff's counsel?" That was my guy. "Oh, yes, we like plaintiff's counsel." "Did you like the doctor's wife who testified?" "Did you like the doctor?" They all said they hated him, but they liked his wife, and they liked me so much that we won a lot of money, and I felt very good about that.
well, thank God they like somebody, right?
Being liked is nice. You don't go wrong when you're liked. And let's see. In the second half of my practice, I try to, in case it sounds horrible until you get into it. I had someone come to me who was accused of raping his daughter. Now, the girl was 21 at the time she reported it to the police, and she was 19, not quite 20 at the time of the alleged rape. And she had talked to her father on the telephone and said to him, "Dad, didn't you hear me say no?" And my guy said, "Well, I was pretty drunk at the time." And that her conversation was being recorded by the district attorney's office in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia. Bucks County is a place we heard a lot about during the last election, a neighborhood that used to be, our county that used to be mostly Republican. It shifted over to the Democratic side, but came back to the Republicans. And they were on the news a bunch. But I took the case because the guy was compelling in saying, this isn't what really happened. And as it turned out, I was able to get my hands on records, medical records, and hired a medical expert who was a board certified psychiatrist handling drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and sexual addiction. And he pulled the case apart for us. And she admitted on the witness stand, after we confronted her with some of her background, that she had been a prostitute, but only for NBA players, National Basketball Association players. And she admitted to a number of things that had happened in her life. In a group session, because we had the records, we were able to pull this out. But in a group session for psychiatry in a mental health ward, she had taken all her clothes off and stripped, and then she did the same thing for a healthcare provider. I forget whether it was a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And she had issues, and those issues came to light. And even though the prosecutor in the case, a very nice woman, I liked her a bunch. I just thought she was well, kind of a turd burger for doing this case. They played that video, or audio rather, the audio tape of him saying, I was pretty drunk at the time, about 30 times. And I was able to turn that case around, not just because of the facts, but you have to figure out who you want your jury to be.
Yeah.
You have a whole slew of people. And usually who would you want on a jury if you were prosecuting a rape case? Well, you probably want some women on that jury. So I let them put all women on the jury, because there is one thing that women hate more than a rapist, and it's a whore. And although you're not supposed to do it, they tell you not to do it in law school. I tried a prostitution case rather than a rape case, and the jury saw through something that had happened that was not a rape. And there were some problems with the story, and I think the mental health issue kind of tossed it up. I felt good about that, because he was a guy, the best offer on the case was, we'll let him do 15 years, or you can argue, but we're going to ask for 20 years on an aggravated rape case, because that's what the charges add up to. And I said, no, we'll try the case. So we tried it. And I owe it to a great psychiatrist. I owe it to a great jury, and 12 women figured it out and decided this wasn't a rape case. But I did other stuff, and maybe that takes us to Atlantic City. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a great
Well,
story.
sometimes that's how the flow, right? That's how the flow of tea works. One question leads into the next, next sequence
Okay.
of the next book. So let's get into Atlantic City.
Sorry?
Let's get into Atlantic City.
Oh, okay. Good. Now, for 15 years, almost 16, I lived in a place called Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City is known for a number of things that are all good. What was good about it was it became the gambling mecca for all of the Northeast. People came to Atlantic City. A lot of them came by bus. In fact, while I was there, it became the bus capital of the world. It was a place that had 16 casinos, first one opening in 1976, which would have been Resorts International. I think Merv Griffin had a piece of that. Oh, and by the way, going back to A Run to Hell, there's a great character in that story. I love her. And she's a real life character. She was transgendered back in the days, 20 years before it became something to protect these people.
That was Rachel, right?
What's that?
Was that Rachel?
Well, it's a little girl you'll find in the story. Not a little girl. She was born as Richard, and she became a star, appearing very often on the Mike Douglas Show, which was a syndicated afternoon talk show nationwide. And Rachel Harlow was her name when she transgendered. She was known in Philadelphia by the press as Philadelphia's famous transsexual. That was her title. You would say Rachel Harlow, then you'd say the rest.
Yeah.
But she was out there, and she was open about it. And in fact, she's in there because she became we'll just say the girlfriend of Grace Kelly's brother, Jack. And she had an important part of she's played an important part in his life. And it's kind of interesting. David Bowie referred to her after she met him at the Cannes Film Festival, referred to Rachel as a great influence in his life when he went through his androgynous stage. And you'll meet her in the book. She's a good character. Anyway, we're in Atlantic City now. Let's go to Atlantic City, because it was a good place to go to. It was a place where a young lawyer, maybe I wasn't even all that young then. I was pretty young. It was a place where a lawyer could make a lot of money if you could find clients. And if you try cases and you win them, you find clients. And although it was a general practice, civil and criminal cases, I became known as the lawyer who represented more sex workers in Atlantic City than any other lawyer, which meant I represented more hookers than any lawyer in the world.
Wow.
And during that period of time, well, I would go to, Atlantic City even had a court that the judges, the prosecutors, and the defense lawyers all called the whore court.
Oh, wow.
It met every other Friday, and they would start at noontime, and they would finish up with whatever the last case was at midnight. And they didn't regard it as a problem. Prostitution in Atlantic City was regarded as something that we should do something about, but we shouldn't do too much, because one of the things people come for to Atlantic City and spend their money is that line of entertainment. And the city itself kind of had a feeling that maybe we look hard at this and maybe we don't. But I tried those cases. And in fact, when most lawyers would go in once a month with a client who would be in that courtroom, I was in there every session with 4 to 6 clients. And I became good at it because I knew there are only 3 defenses really to this. All you have to do to prove a case of prostitution is establish somebody offered sex for cash. That's all you have to prove. Those are the only elements. Did she offer you sex? Did she ask for cash? Did he offer you sex? Did he ask for cash? That's the offense. And the vice cops all knew that was all they had to do, was say somebody offered them sex for cash. But I knew, besides the 3 generally recognized offenses to that, I knew about 30 more. So I called up my sister one day. Now, my sister is a lawyer in Honolulu. And what happened at the time was that we had people working as sex workers in Atlantic City, but it would become too hot for them to work there, which meant the vice cops recognized them on site. So they would move to the next town. The next town was Vegas. And when the same thing happened there, they moved to Honolulu, where my sister practiced. So I called up Wendy and said, this is really easy. You have no idea how easy this is. There's only 3 defenses to this crime, and I know 30. I will tell you, you get the clients, I'll refer my clients to you, because they're bound to end up in trouble, because they end up in trouble everywhere. And Wendy said, all right, I'll do this. And then one day I got a call from one of a young lady who said, oh, Mr. Schofield, we can't go to your sister anymore. She's trying to cure us all. And I had to call her up. I went crazy. I went absolutely crazy, because I'm screaming, are you out of your mind? We're lawyers. We don't cure the clients. You don't want to see your niece and nephew go to college. So anyway, we had that conversation, and Wendy was no longer on the list of referral lawyers. But I did more than that down there. And there is a story that comes from Atlantic City. It's a great one. When the book was first published, I had an ex-wife call me up and complain, you killed me on the first page. And I said,
well, that's a good thing sometimes.
Until the second page. And there's a story. It's actually my favorite story. It's a whodunit, a mafia whodunit. It's a 70-year story. You meet a mafia character who has a heart of gold, who only knows how to murder. You'll meet a lawyer who's charged with a gruesome murder of his wife, and a female prosecutor known as the mistress of major crimes, who only knows how to prosecute till there's nothing left to prosecute. And great 70-year story. It's a good one to start with, because some of the characters float through both stories. The Boardwalkers, which is set in Atlantic City, and the other story. And it's usually best to start out with the Boardwalkers, because that's how you meet the characters that flow through. But,
so we got to get the Boardwalkers first before we get the Run to Hell.
Yeah, I would recommend that. It's a good story. It's a great whodunit, and
well, I kind of like that flow anyway, Frederick, right? Because you're on the boardwalks, and then you're running for hell.
That's right. Wear your flip flops, hit the boards, and
don't wear your flip flops because you're going to flop.
And let me tell you why it was a great place to live. I had neighbors who were casino workers, I moved down to the Brigantine, which is a little island just north of Atlantic City, connected by a bridge, where we had virtually no crime because you had to go back across the bridge after you committed your crime, and everybody's afraid they closed the bridge down. That's the first thing the police did when a crime was committed. They closed the bridge down. So there's very little crime on our island. But then there was Atlantic City. And I think some of the people I met there who lived in Brigantine, you had everything there from casino dealers to casino presidents. The presidents all lived on the beach. The rest of them lived off the beach. But I had a good friend there, Bucky Howard. Bucky was the president of 3 of Donald Trump's hotels. While he was the president of the Trump Marina Casino, he had an argument with Donald's then wife, Ivana, and he got fired for having the argument. He was president of the casino at that time, making a little over $1 million a year, which is good money back in the 80s. And he got fired. And I said, Bucky, why would you have an argument with Donald's wife? What was it over? He said, I didn't like the way she was decorating the lobby area. It was too garish. And I said, do you know of anything more garish than the lobby area of a casino? Are you out of your mind? And Bucky sat at home. He sat at home for 6 months because there aren't a whole lot of president jobs he could move into. And he said, one day I'm making sandwiches for my kids so they can go to school. And I'm in my kitchen making peanut butter and jelly and some bologna, and I'm throwing it all together. And one of the biggest limos I ever saw pulled up to my front door. This guy jumps out of the casino and runs up to my door. And I'm watching him because I can see right from where I'm making the sandwiches. And he said, and it was Donald Trump. And Donald said, I need you to be president of the Taj Mahal. I'm going to open that thing soon. I don't care what my wife says about you. So my guy Bucky moved into the Taj and made the lobby just like he liked it.
Wow.
They were good people, most of them. Yeah.
So, Frederick, how did you go from this big lawyer with all these mafia families and all of that to the, what do you have here? The American Boy Scouts, like Boy Scouts to mafia.
Oh, I started with them. You know, that was a great job. I did that. I went in the Marine Corps after high school. I took a little bit of college, decided this is not for me. This is not exactly not what I want to do.
Not my cup of tea.
To kill commies for Christ, I guess. I went to Vietnam as a Marine. And when I came back, finished college. I was out of college in 3 years. And I was going to go to law school. I figured that's what I wanted to do. The family had all done that. Why not do it too? It seemed like a good way to make money. And anyway, I needed to put together some money to go to law school. So I worked for actually, that wasn't my first job, though. My first job was with a radio station. I was the voice of WSPK-FM, the sound of good music in Poughkeepsie, which got on my resume as broadcasting in New York, Poughkeepsie, New York. But I did that for 2 months, hated it, and somebody offered me a job doing public relations for the Boy Scouts, and that was a lot of fun. And I look good in uniform, so they put me back in uniform as a Boy Scout, and I raised money for it, mostly fundraising and some boy racing.
Well, I personally like a man in a uniform and in a suit. I think it's clean and cut.
Yeah, it was a good thing. And then I went to law school. I started in Stetson Law in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I used to come back to catch my old buddies. I came back to see who got bald, who got fat, and who married ugly women. And my friends did all three. But some of them made a lot of money, and I guess they were happy for that. And I actually finished up in New York. I graduated from New York Law School in Manhattan.
So
I have my tea.
You said something in the middle of our conversation, in the middle of the show. You said that you were born in an office. I could see that because your grandfather, your great grandfather, you guys were all lawyers. So how was that as a kid?
Well, not all. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather argued a case in the Supreme Court of the United States for the Pennsylvania Railroad. My maternal grandfather, he has the best war story I've ever heard. I'll share it with you. He was a physician, a urologist, and graduated college and med school from the University of Pennsylvania. Had a very nice practice. But then the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and it really pissed him off. And it made him so mad that he had to do something about it. And you have to understand, my family, we're all Quakers. Quakers are all pacifists. How I got in the Marine Corps is a whole nother story. But and that's because my grandpop's influence. He was a big influence. But Grandpop Duck, the day after Pearl Harbor, signed up to join the Navy. And what they did with him was say, well, you're a medical doctor. We don't care that you're a urologist. You're going to become a general surgeon, and we're going to put you on a hospital ship, and you'll follow the Marines around the Pacific. So he does that. And one day, a senior officer comes in to see him and says, he was also a Fred. They don't know how to name anybody in my family except by Fred. And they said, Fred, the senior officer says, we have somebody you have to see tomorrow. And it's because you're the only board certified urologist in this area of operation, but you can't say anything to anybody about who he is or what he has. And the guy came in, and my grandpa treated him. And the guy was Bob Hope, and my grandpa treated him for the clap. And for 15 years after that, we got Christmas cards from Mr. and Mrs. Bob Hope. And anyway, my grandpa was my influence, and he was one of the reasons I went in the military.
I'm an old school old soul. Like when you're mentioning all these people, Grace Kelly, Cary Grant, Bob Hope, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so in my zone.
I only know Bob Hope from the Christmas cards. I was a little kid when he came back from the war.
Oh, come on. You never watched any of Hope's comedy relief shows and all that?
The Bob Hope movies? I love the road movies. The road movies were terrific. Most of them were pretty mediocre. You don't see much of them today, but I loved them at the time.
Yeah, I love the old shows because I found that they were more realistic, more authentic.
I'm going through that with all the Christmas movies now. Started out in the house with, of course, It's a Wonderful Life. And we've already seen Chevy Chase do Christmas Vacation. My very favorite from 1948 with David Niven and Cary Grant. Who was the lead in this? The Bishop's Wife. Great Christmas movie. If you haven't seen that, see The Bishop's Wife.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now. You got my brains working here. Frederick, I want to talk to you about your tea.
What are your life on that?
Oh, yes. I want to talk to you about your tea because the tea that you gave me was tantalizing every audience. I love the word tantalizing. Tell me why you gave me that word.
Well, don't take it personally. I don't think it happens that personally.
I love it. I love those kind of things. My viewers and listeners know Miss Liz has a little dark side. So why that word, Frederick, tantalizing?
What's that?
Why that word tantalizing?
Tantalizing. Well, I know. Let's see. I think I needed something to go with a T. That was the first thing that came to mind.
I like it because nobody else has ever given me that word in the 5 years. So I love it. And I like a little dark twist. Everybody knows Miss Liz has a little dark sense of humor. So I loved it.
What are some of the words that people have come up with that you've enjoyed?
Trouble. Because it tells me a little bit about them, right? Because they might have some little trouble in them. Well, there's a lot of words that have really surprised me, like transformation, because transformation is different for a lot of people, right? There's stories and that as well. But I mean, yours, tantalizing, I've never gotten that word. So I was just like, I love it. I love when I get new words because I'm just like, oh, let me look that word up. Oh, yes, I like it.
You'll find words like that in the Boardwalkers. They just come out.
But it actually goes with what you do, Frederick, like all the work that you do and all of that as well, right? Like, come on, you're a mafia lord. Like,
It's been fun. Life is fun.
So, Frederick, working with all of these families and crimes and all that, were you ever scared for your life?
I've been scared a few times. I had a client uh, that was a member of the Philadelphia crime family. I took him to a bail hearing and was able to get him released without bail, even though he had already served time for murder for of the first degree. And we had a fee dispute. And I remember he came into my office and he said, "You got me off, but you didn't spend that much time with us." And I said, "But that's true. But that's what you agreed to. That was the deal. I get you off and you give me this. That's
And you
part of
go
what
away.
happens. Now, if I didn't get you this, you could have a complaint." And this guy, he looked at me and he brought a heavyweight into my office. And at that point in time, it used to be lawyers had books. We don't have books anymore. Lawyers don't work out of books. We work online. And it's so much easier to look things up in books. You got to have all the books. You got to look through them all. You get them online. Not only can you find authority online for what you're trying to do, but you click a little button and it'll look up all the cases since then that may have changed that law. Used to be you had to go through other books to get to other cases. And at the time, I had all kinds of books behind me because I didn't have pictures. I couldn't think of what to put up when I opened my first law office. So I put books behind me. And they had the booksellers had good deals on them. Considering you're going to probably make a few bucks, you'll pay us back. But I had a book that I never used. It was something on finance, one of the statutes books. I had cut that out. And I had a big hole in the middle of the book, and I kept cashing it for just these kinds of occasions. And we resolved for a case by me opening the book and giving him some money. And he just laughed and said, "That must be a great book." But there were some people there. And in fact, you meet some of the people in the Boardwalkers. I had a client, you'll find a story in the Boardwalkers. Antonio DeBona. Is a great character in that story. You follow him for 70 years. And there's a great story in there about him and a piece of scalp found by his wife in the back of in the butt of a revolver. And it's a true story. It came to me from a client who came to me. I actually ended up representing his wife in a divorce against him. I told both of them, I can't represent the wife because you might kill me. And frankly, I'm not interested in being killed over a divorce case. And I said, "I'll do this though. I'll work out a settlement that you're both happy with. And if either one of you is unhappy, you don't kill me. I'm just walking away from the case. And you both understand this, and you'll give me an upfront fee to get working on this." And that's what happened. They were both happy with their divorce. And the husband ran off with his kid's babysitter. And the wife came back to me. She had a case in Atlantic City. Her husband owned a piece of a restaurant, which was very popular, called Mama Mott's, which was run by a really nice gay guy. I liked him very much. But he got himself in trouble and he ran off without paying the wife back who had given him a bunch of money to open this restaurant. And I remember taking the case and thinking, who the heck knows what's involved in this? And we got a judgment against the guy for $2.5 million for not paying her back. But then he went in the witness protection program. And we knew where he was, but we were told not to follow up. And I gave that information to the wife, and she said, "I agree with you because they're going to come after me. They're not coming after you." He was just kind of connected with people that were not nice.
Yeah.
But,
well, Frederick,
that was Atlantic City.
I really want to.
Oh, we did get out of this out of it though. She got the baby grand piano that was in the restaurant, and I got the liquor license.
Oh.
The liquor license I gave to a broker, said, "Sell." I said, "Freddie, we can't sell these things. There's so many liquor licenses in Atlantic City, they're not worth anything." So I ended up with a liquor license. I served myself drinks with it.
Well, Frederick, thank you so much for bringing these books to my attention and to my listeners and audience out there. You talk about divorce, that's a run to hell right there. I know because I've been divorced. But I mean, go out and check these books out. A Run to Hell, the Boardwalkers. Check out the Boardwalkers first, as Frederick has mentioned, and then go to the Run to Hell. But Frederick, if anybody would like to reach out to you to have them on their podcast or to reach out for the books or any of that other stuff, where can they find you?
Frederick-Schofield.com. And it's I sent you a video. If it gets up, the website will be there, but it's Frederick-Schofield.com. And anything, there's contact information there for the publisher. And if you contact them, they shoot me everything. I love talking to people that are connected to
Awesome.
the books.
Well, I'm so glad that you reached out to me because you know what? I like a little thriller, and you're perfect for my countdown of closing up the podcast because people can go back and check out these interviews at
Well,
any
it's been a
time.
lot of fun. I've enjoyed my tea with you, and it's been a lot
Well,
of
thank
fun.
you so much for that. And thank you for bringing your books to my attention and to my listeners out there. We will be back at 7 p.m. tonight with the second tea time before we wrap up the podcast. So we'll be having Michael Higson coming in. He's a 9/11 survivor. He was born blind, and he's going to be sharing his story about um, his story with the dog, his dog that helped him, called Thunderdog, and we're going to be talking about that story. And then on tomorrow is the last tea time of 5 seasons, 5 years. We're wrapping it up with two amazing ladies from Canada, from that wrote the book The Canvas of Life, and we're going to wrap it all up and bring all of these tea times together as a big masterpiece of life and the story of Miss Liz and all the incredible tea time guests that I've had. So until then, stay tuned, keep serving your teas, and we will make a difference with conversation, storytelling, and words, and keep being you. And again, Frederick, thank you for joining me. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for the questions that came in. I appreciate you guys all. I will see you guys at 7 p.m. with Michael Higson.
I'll see you then.